There is a couple in Tokyo living in 32 square meters, roughly the size of a one-car garage, with one child, one cat, and a kitchen you could touch both walls of at once. Their apartment has no separate living room, no guest room, no storage unit rented somewhere across town for the overflow, and yet, when you sit on their floor cushion in the evening, the space doesn't feel cramped. It feels calm, almost spacious, in a way square footage alone can't explain. Visitors often say the same thing without prompting, that it feels bigger than it measures, and none of them can quite explain why, only that something about sitting in that room feels different from sitting in rooms twice its size back home. Somewhere else in the world right now, someone is standing in a 4-bedroom house with a 2-car garage and a finished basement, and they still feel like there's no room to breathe. More space, more stuff, and somehow, less peace than a family living in a fraction of the room. They've added a she shed, a home office, a second living room nobody sits in, and the house keeps getting bigger, while the feeling of calm they were chasing keeps getting further away. This is not about square footage. It is not about owning less furniture than everyone else. And it is not about some minimalist aesthetic you copy off a design account with a beige couch and 3 plants. It is 7 invisible habits, and every one of them is built around a single idea most Western homes never even consider. A home doesn't feel peaceful because of how much space it has. It feels peaceful because of how much of that space is doing exactly one job at a time. Stay with me until number 5, because number 5 is the habit that, once you see it, will make you look at every room in your own home completely differently. Most people are fighting their square footage instead of their structure, and number 5 is exactly where that mistake gets exposed. Let's go through all 7. Habit 1. Nothing sits without a reason to be there. Walk into most Western living rooms and count the objects that are simply there out of habit. A decorative bowl nobody uses, a stack of magazines nobody reads, a chair nobody sits in that exists mostly to hold folded laundry. None of it is doing anything. It's just occupying visual and physical space, quietly, permanently. In small Japanese homes, this luxury doesn't exist. Every object earns its spot by actually being used, regularly, on purpose. If it isn't, it doesn't stay. This isn't deprivation. It's editing. A room with 20 objects that are all in active use feels calmer than a room with 60 objects, half of which nobody could explain the purpose of if asked directly. The count doesn't need to shrink toward 0. It needs to shrink toward relevance, toward things actually earning the space they're taking up, rather than simply having arrived there once and never left. There's a specific kind of low-grade tension that comes from being surrounded by objects with no clear job, and most people never identify it as coming from the objects themselves. They just feel a general restlessness in certain rooms and assume it's about the day they've had, not the 12 decorative items on a shelf that have been silently unaccounted for since the day they were unwrapped. Habit 2. One room, several jobs, one job at a time. Western homes tend to assign a single fixed purpose to every room, permanently, whether the space is being used that way in a given moment or not. A dining room that hosts 4 dinners a year still exists as a dining room, doing nothing, 361 days out of it. Small Japanese homes flip this completely. A single room becomes a bedroom at night, a sitting room in the evening, sometimes a workspace during the day, through furniture that folds away, futons that get stored, low tables that get moved rather than fixed features that get walked around. The room isn't cluttered with every possible function sitting there simultaneously. It holds exactly one job at a time, visible and uncluttered, and simply transforms when the day calls for something different. Multiple functions, never competing for the same square meter at once. A Western home solves the same problem by adding rooms. A small Japanese home solves it by adding time, letting one space simply become something else when it's needed, rather than permanently reserving square footage for a function that only shows up occasionally. The dining room sitting empty 361 days a year isn't neutral. It's actively costing the rest of the home space it could be, using every single one of those days. A small Japanese apartment simply refuses to pay that cost, treating time as the flexible resource instead of square footage. Habit 3. The floor stays empty on purpose. In most homes, the floor slowly becomes storage without anyone deciding that consciously. Bags dropped by the door, shoes scattered, a treadmill that became a coat rack months ago. In small Japanese homes, the floor is treated as sacred negative space, deliberately kept clear, because in a small footprint, floor space is the single resource that makes a room feel larger or smaller than its actual dimensions. An empty floor reads as spacious, even in a genuinely tiny room. A cluttered floor reads as cramped, even in a large one. The floor isn't where things live. It's the canvas the rest of the room gets measured against. Cover 40% of it, and the brain registers the whole room as 40% smaller, regardless of what the tape measure actually says. This is why two apartments with identical dimensions can produce completely opposite reactions from the same visitor. It was never really about the walls or the ceiling height. It was about how much of the floor was left alone to simply be floor, unclaimed, unoccupied, doing nothing but existing as breathing room underfoot. Habit 4. Storage disappears instead of displaying. Western homes tend to treat storage as something to showcase. Open shelving loaded with objects, glass cabinets full of things meant to be seen and admired constantly. Small Japanese homes do the opposite almost entirely. Storage is built to vanish. Sliding doors, closed cabinets, built-in compartments that blend into the wall itself. What isn't currently being used isn't currently visible. The mind processes a room by counting what it sees, not what technically exists inside it. A home where most of its contents are quietly hidden behind clean surfaces reads as calm, no matter how much is actually stored inside those surfaces. Visibility, not volume, is what the eye actually responds to. Two apartments can contain the exact same number of objects and feel completely different, purely because one hides them and the other displays them. We're halfway through now, and this is exactly where the habit I promised at the start comes in, the one that reframes almost everything that came before it. Now habit 5, the one I mentioned at the beginning, the one that changes how you look at every room you own. Habit 5. Negative space is treated as a feature, not a failure. Here is the belief almost every Western homeowner operates on without questioning it. Empty space is wasted space. A corner without furniture is an opportunity missed. A wall without a shelf is underused. Fill it, furnish it, justify every inch. But traditional Japanese design holds the exact opposite belief, something called ma, the idea that the empty space between objects is not absence. It's an active ingredient, doing real work, the same way a pause in music isn't a gap in the song, but part of what makes the melody land. Slow down here, because this reframes everything else on this list. A room stuffed to its edges with furniture and objects gives the eye nowhere to rest, and a mind with nowhere visual to rest doesn't feel calm even in a technically well-furnished space. A room with genuine negative space, walls left bare, corners left open, gives the eye somewhere to land between objects, and that resting point is where the actual feeling of calm physically comes from. Most people trying to make a small home feel bigger add more clever storage, more furniture that does double duty, more optimization. The actual answer is often the opposite. Leave something empty on purpose, and the whole room breathes differently, immediately, without a single new object entering it. This is the habit almost nobody tries first, because it feels backwards, doing less to a room that already feels like it needs more. And yet it's consistently the single change that shifts a space the most, faster than any storage solution or clever furniture piece ever could. There's a reason this concept has a name in Japanese design, and not really an equivalent term in Western design vocabulary at all. Western design tends to treat a room as a container to be filled efficiently. Ma treats a room as a composition, where the gaps between elements are doing just as much visual and emotional work as the elements themselves. the same way silence between musical notes is what actually lets you hear the rhythm. Habit 6. Light is treated as a material, not an accessory. In most homes, lighting is an afterthought, a single overhead fixture flooding the whole room evenly, harshly, all at once, from a single source. Small Japanese homes tend to layer light deliberately, low warm lamps instead of overhead glare, natural light filtered softly through paper screens, shadow allowed to exist rather than eliminated entirely. Light becomes something with texture, not just brightness. A room lit in flat, even brightness reads as functional but sterile. A room with layered, softer light reads as calm, even at the exact same square footage, because the light itself is doing part of the emotional work a larger floor plan would otherwise have to do. Two identical rooms, lit differently, will get described by visitors in completely different emotional language, one as an office, the other as somewhere they'd actually want to sit down. Most people only think about lighting when something is broken or too dim to work under. Almost nobody thinks about lighting as an actual determinant of how calm a room feels, which is exactly why it stays invisible as a habit, even though its effect is anything but. Habit 7. The entry decompresses you before the rest of the home does. The genkan, the small transitional step just inside a Japanese front door, exists specifically to mark a boundary. Shoes come off here. The outside world, its noise, its dirt, its urgency, gets left at this exact threshold, deliberately, before a person steps any further inside. Most Western homes have no equivalent boundary at all. The chaos of the street walks straight through the front door and directly into the living room without pause. This small transitional ritual, even just 30 seconds of it, gives the nervous system a clear signal that the space beyond this point is a different mode entirely. Skip that transition, and a home never quite gets the chance to feel separate from the world outside it, no matter how carefully the rest of it is designed. A home without a boundary at its entry is, in a very real sense, just an extension of the street, no matter what's inside it. Bringing it together. Here's what connects all 7 of these. None of them require more square footage than you already have. None of them require a renovation, a bigger budget, or moving somewhere with more rooms. Every single one of them is about how a space is used and edited, not how large it is to begin with. A small home doesn't feel peaceful because it happens to contain less stuff by coincidence. It feels peaceful because every object, every room, every open corner is doing exactly one clear job, and nothing is fighting for attention it wasn't given on purpose. A large home crammed with competing functions and unedited objects will always feel smaller than its actual square footage. A small home, edited down to exactly what it needs, will always feel larger than its actual square footage. The floor plan was never really the variable that mattered. Most people trying to fix how a home feels start by looking at what's missing: more storage, more rooms, more square footage to expand into. The actual answer is almost always the opposite direction: less competing for attention, more negative space left alone, fewer objects doing more deliberate work. It was never really about the size of the home at all. It was about how much of the space that already existed was actually allowed to just be space, rather than being filled the moment it became available. So here's what I want you to do before you close this video. Pick one habit from this list, just one. Clear one floor space completely. Hide one shelf of visible clutter behind a closed door. Leave one wall genuinely bare and notice what it does to the room around it. Tell me which number you're starting with in the comments, 1 through 7. And if this changed how you see your own home even a little, send it to one person who keeps saying they need a bigger place to finally feel calm. They might just need a smaller list of things fighting for the space they already have.